Welcome back, everyone, to our soul searching conversation with Sanam, and I am Sanam Lalwani. Today, I am extremely delighted to have for the first time on my live platform a panel discussion with three spectacular women as my special guests, who are brilliant authors and much more. It is such a pleasure to be here in the presence of these beautiful and inspirational souls. And I know that they are driven women. I am so grateful that amidst their busy schedules and the differing time zones of Hong Kong, US, and Dubai, they are here today giving us their valuable time. So thank you so much. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. We have Kavita Daswani from LA. Hi, Kavita. We have we have Sahara Mirpuri, also known as Dolly to me, from Hong Kong. Hi, Dolly.
Hi, guys.
And we've got Sandhya Nankani from New Jersey. Hi, Sandhya. Welcome all three of you on this platform. I just want to check. Sandhya, are you able to unmute?
Now I can, yeah.
Now you can.
Hi,
Okay,
everyone.
First, I would like to introduce Kavita. Kavita Daswani is an international journalist covering fashion, beauty, and more. She started out as the fashion editor of the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. Kavita is also an Indian American author who has published 8 best-selling books. She published her first book in 2003. Her books represent the changes taking place in the diaspora Indian communities. Kavita's books have been published in 17 languages. Wow, that is so exciting, Kavita. We would love to hear your journey, starting as a journalist and how you diversified into writing books.
Well, firstly, Sanam, thanks for inviting us and allowing us to be part of this. Well, I've been a journalist since I was 17 in Hong Kong. I left school young and I just started freelancing for some magazines there, and then I started working regularly at the South China Morning Post. But it wasn't until I got married in 2000 and moved to LA, and then I really started writing this book, which got picked up fairly quickly, and then it just sort of went from there. And then one became two, became three. Anyway, it just carried on. But I've continued working as a journalist throughout. I never gave that up.
Okay.
And so I've been doing it a really long time. So it's basically the same. I feel like it's the same skill set. You just set a deadline for yourself and you self-edit and you motivate yourself and then you just go. So it was an easy transition for me.
Okay. To diversify into books, right? It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Wow. So can you tell us a little bit about your books and maybe if there's a common theme, if you could explain to us about
that? My very first one for matrimonial purposes, and that really came about, I was talking to, because I was working as a fashion editor and I was traveling all the time, and I would try, and I was kind of in the throes of looking for a husband, right? Or falling in line with those cultural expectations and allowing myself to be set up. It never happened for me that way. As it turned out, I had to find my own man. But in any event, when I was telling friends and I'd be sitting having, dinner with friends in Paris or London, whoever, and I would say, oh, I'm going to go to Singapore to this wedding and meet this guy, or, and they'd be like, well, okay, tell us more. So that kind of planted the seed of an idea. And I thought, okay, people are interested in how this works today. So I just sort of took that. A lot of that was based on my own life, the lives of women, you know, my sisters, just cousins. And so a lot of it is not made up, you know, and I just kind of took that and went with it. And then from there, I found that then I got married, moved here, and was trying to, you know, change. You know, you're like a single woman. You know, I married late. I was 36. So just kind of adjusting to married life and all of those expectations as well. So that became book number 2. And then it just sort of went from there. So I found, like, I think this is true for everybody. I think if you can put your own story into whatever you write, even if it's fiction, that lends it a lot more credibility, authenticity. You've got a really unique voice, I feel. So anyway, that was my approach, and it seems to have worked.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think it's really important to find your voice. So, I mean,
Right.
it's amazing that you did find your voice there, because a lot of people do know that that's what they want to do, but sometimes you just don't find it. So that's
Right.
great. That's really amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So next, we have Sahara here. So I wanted to introduce Sahara next. A rebel without a cause, Sahara Mirpuri writes poems and short stories about love, magic, and the strength within. She believes that each of us has a key role to play when it comes to making the world a better place. In her first book, Mama Gaia, Sahara contemplates the purpose of existence as individuals in this world and hopes to inspire an appreciation for love and the beauty of life on earth in children and adults alike. So welcome.
Thank you.
My question to you is, what inspired you to write your first book, Mama Gaia? And can you tell our viewers who Mama Gaia is and what this book is about?
Sure. So thank you for that sweet introduction, Sanam. Thank you. And Kavita, I loved what you said, by the way. I resonated with your ideas about writing and how it kind of is your voice and everything. For me, it's very similar to what she said in terms of, lending my voice to the idea that I have, and then it just takes a unique kind of path that everybody is on. And I will tell you what inspired me first to write Mama Gaia. So there was a story idea that came to my head, and I wrote like one chapter, and as I wrote it, I was so excited. It's like something came alive, within me. And there were little drawings along with it. And I didn't know how to take that forward. And I kept saying, yeah, I'll work on it. But, life happens and things happen. And so it was lying in my cabinet for a while, like at least 5 years.
Wow.
And then I was in Hong Kong driving by a particular area, and there was a lot of traffic, and there were ambulances and police cars and firefighters and like the whole deal. So as the car slowed down and I could see what the issue was, like why people on the streets were just, on the street were just standing and looking in a particular direction, I saw that there was a guy standing outside the ledge of his, like maybe from the 6th or 8th floor from his house, like wanting to jump. And the firefighter was talking to him from the window of his house, saying, come back in. And I mean, even if these things are happening, you kind of understand what the situation is playing out to be already, right? And people are like, go back. They're screaming on the street. And what hit me most at that point was when I looked at that guy, and it's like he was far, but he was still close enough for me to see the look in his eyes, and there was just nothing there. It was like he wanted to jump, he wanted to end it all. But you know how we have this innate need to even hold our own hand or want to survive? Like our body wants to survive. Like Sadhguru says, if you like hold your breath for like a minute or two, you'll automatically want your hand off your nose because your body's, you know, grasping to breathe.
Yeah.
And so even that I couldn't see, you know, behind his eyes. I mean, so it was very quick, just a few like minutes, you know, that this happened. And it hit me very hard because what I could see in his eyes was this entire like he didn't even want to be there for his own self. So then it started making me think about, you know, what level do we have to get to mentally, emotionally, or physically to even not want to hold our own hand through life, you know, not want to survive. And does it, like, it made me question, you know, does life get that serious that, you know, everything else which we know is just momentary, you know, it's not permanent. We all know nothing in life is permanent, but even that seems overwhelming. You know, what stage does a person have to get to till they even forget that? So I just wanted to write a story basically which would take the seriousness out of how we see life, you know, with the significance. It would lessen the significance. And I wanted to make it a storybook for adults and children. And ergo, Mama Gaia was born.
Wow.
And so, yeah. And then after that, I just started, you know, I had help. My best friend, she held me accountable. And every single day I would get a message. So how much have you written? Have you finished writing the book? What's happening with the publishing? What is this thing? And I was on her program because she's a nutritionist, like a holistic nutritionist. So when I joined her program, she basically said, so what do you want to do? And I said, I want to write a book. And then she was like, okay, fine, we're going to get this done, you know, and she never let me stop. And so for me, you know, Kavita, like you said, you had goals and you wrote it down and it worked. For me, I'm just the opposite. I need someone to, like, you know, push me to do this. As you can see, I waited 5 years in the beginning. But yeah, after that, it just, you know, grew into something. And then I wanted illustrations in it. So, you know, I got a really good illustrator to illustrate every single scenario. And it's a story about the goddess Mama Gaia. And Gaia is a goddess of the earth, but she's also the primal goddess. So she's just floating through space, and she sees her reflection in the darkness of space. And then as she waves to it, it waves back, and she's like really like entranced by what's happening because the dark is communicating with this version of her. And so it's like her reflection and her are suddenly one, and she can see herself in everything. And so she falls in love with that. And as that love grows, it basically travels to her belly, and, you know, she births, you know, little children. And so it's like these children are the ones who, you know, come to her one day and say, how come you're, you know, our mom and you shine so bright, but we're your kids, we don't shine as bright as you, you know? And so she tells them that, well, to shine as bright as me, you have to first, you know, understand who you are. And the moment you understand who you are is when you get that realization, you know, that you are in everything, or everything is you. And so they say, okay, how do we shine as bright as you? And she says, you have to go to school for that. And then they say, school? What school? And then she points to a little blue planet, and she says, that's Earth. That's your school. And so the entire story is like a, you know, the story of life, so that we don't take it seriously. You know, we see that we're here momentarily to learn certain things, and then we come back to the light, and then we're back there. And every time we have to learn, it's just like a back and forth, like an enter, exit thing, without taking the seriousness of it to heart, you know? So that's basically the conversation in Mama Gaia between the kids and the mother.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Because like even Satya Sai Baba says, life is a game, play it.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't say that you should make everything so serious in life. And it's so nice to know that you have followed your Swadharma or your life purpose while writing this book. Because I still remember us having connected on a soul level during our landmark courses that we took together. And it's so lovely to see how much, we have progressed since then. So it's
I
just,
agree.
yeah.
I
But
agree.
no, thank you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
last but not least, we have Sandhya here today as well. Sandhya Nankani is a producer, entrepreneur, writer, and publisher. She got her start in journalism before moving into children's educational publishing. Sandhya has also authored a few books, including a memoir biography of the revered Dada J.P. Daswani. In 2008, she founded the Literary Safari, a children's media studio. A Webby nominated producer, she is also the creator of the Story Seeds podcast, which empowers young people's imaginations and voices. So welcome, Sandhya. With all your qualifications, you're muted again. Shall I just, okay. How is that?
I think that worked. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you
that's
so
great.
much.
Okay, so with all your qualifications, there are many questions for you. But I'm sure all our viewers are first curious to know about your experience while writing a book about our respected Dada Vaswani and how that came about.
Thank
Can
you
you
so
please
much for
share with
having
us?
me. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be part of this really wonderful panel. And I'm learning so much from you, Kavita and Sahara, and so much resonates. And like we said, we could have a whole other um, day-long conversation on these themes. So I guess the story of how I came to write the book about Dada, which is called Moments with a Master, and I was looking for my copy. I have one copy of it, and I was looking for it, and I found it upstairs in my daughter's bedside drawer. I've been trying to get her to read it. It hasn't happened yet, but she's 12, so maybe one day. But I wrote it in my mid to late 20s, so I was actually 27 when I wrote it. So 20 years ago. Um, and the way it came about was I grew up, sort of around Dada. My family spent a lot of time at the mission. And so that was sort of one of the places that we would go to on a regular basis. And as I progressed into my professional life, I was doing journalism and a lot of different forms of writing and communications, I guess. In After I graduated from college, and there was one summer when Dada actually visited my family in Ghana. So I went to Accra to help out with some sort of prep stuff, and I somehow landed up having the task of writing these like daily summaries and press release, like the summaries you get, like today Dada went here, met this, and sort of trying putting things in context. So doing a lot of writing to help on that trip. And that's when I got to know Krishna Didi, and she was like, oh, I really like your writing. Why don't you come to India and you can interview Dada next time you're there, and maybe write some pieces about him, or so on and so forth. So I wrote a short little interview about him for, in those days, I don't know if it's still around, Hinduism Today magazine. And that sort of led into this opportunity where I used to spend a lot more time in India in the past. And there was one summer where I spent about 3 weeks interviewing Dada every day. So I would go meet him after tea, after he'd had his tea in the afternoon, and get like a 45-minute block of time. And they said, just ask him whatever you want. And that was I was in my mid 20s. So, we have so many questions about life and spirituality and marriage and eating and like just everything. So I just basically I sat with my cousins, we made a long list of questions. my sister and I like we just made long questions. I took my recorder and I literally just sat there and kind of went in with my journalist hat, but also my like spiritual aspirant hat, and of course like this incredible guru in front of me. So it was an interesting combination because sometimes you want to separate the three, and sometimes it's hard to. And so yeah, so that whole experience led to me having a lot of content, right? A lot of material, and that's when Krishna Didi said, well, why don't you write a book that's like a biography, or, try to think about what you would want to write with this, but write a book. And I was like, a book? Huh, I've never written a book. Like what, I'd written a lot, but the idea of actually writing an entire book was a little intimidating, but I began to do it and started kind of just writing it as a straightforward biography and chapters about the things we had discussed. And then my father was quite ill at the time. So that was a big part of my life, kind of as a caregiver and, just being there with him. And I started thinking and reflecting on how this experience had given me strength actually to go through that journey of, sort of watching a parent die, right? And that those last year and a half of his life. And I had a manuscript, I showed it to him and he was like, this is not very good, Sandhya. It's like not you. It's not your voice. Kavita, you talk, and Sahara, you're both talking in voice. And he said, what's your voice? Like, find it. And that was really great advice. I still have the notes he gave me. And I put myself into it, and then I began writing. And in the process, my dad actually passed away. And the following year, I went to India, and I still had sort of like a rough manuscript. But I was really stuck. I think, we talk about writer's block. I think writer's block is like sometimes a life situation, sometimes it's internal fear, and other times it's just, you need someone to push you like externally, right?
Like Sarah.
So, yeah. So the accountability thing was really important for me. And I was also kind of like, coming out of a difficult period in my life, right? Of having lost a parent. So when I was in India, that's when, Krishna Didi said to me, okay, you need to write this book, right? So here's an apartment, it's empty. Dada was actually not living at the mission right at that moment. He was like a few blocks away because they were doing renovations. So it was literally across the hall from the apartment where he was staying. And she said, we'll give you a room, we'll feed you, we'll give you tea, snacks, just come sit here and write. Like no one will bother you. And I'd gone on a lot of personal writing retreats until then, kind of because that was like my thing in my 20s, right? So I was like, oh, that sounds great. I was very tempted, and that got me there. And I wrote, sort of the whole book over the course of a month, and then, made revisions, and that's how, and put myself in the narrative. And I think once I was able to acknowledge that my experience was, I was able to, it's not acknowledge, I think I was able to be brave enough to share my own experience and my weaknesses and my fears and, sort of everything else, sadness, and say, okay, as a writer, that is the job that I have to allow myself to be vulnerable. And be okay with doing it. Then I was able to just write, like I wasn't afraid anymore. So that was an interesting learning moment for me as a writer.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Does anyone else want to add in, Kavita or Sahara, about the vulnerability factor or anything? Or you want me to go on? Let me know. Is there anything? I need to... Okay.
There. No, no, I was just really relating to that. Actually, Sandhya, when you create something and your father's like, yeah, no, this isn't good, So I suppose to come back from that, to not let it completely destroy your sense of confidence or your belief in your own worth as a writer, just to be able to, let's just reinvent this, how can I do this differently, and how can I do this better? So yeah, yay, you did it.
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Especially our closest ones are the ones we hold, you know, in the highest regard in terms of our own validation. So for sure, that's job well done.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
When I
fact,
sent my second book, the first draft of my second novel, I sent it to my agent and she called me up. This was horrible. And she says to me, she was not, she was not this, she was not a polite woman, let's just say. And she rang me up and she said, she goes, I hated this. I said, oh, and she said, this should be sitting on the top of a pile of trash. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I just remember, like, I think I cried for like 6 hours.
well,
My husband was saying she doesn't know anything. I said, oh, but she does. She literally does. And she's not wrong. So anyway, it took me probably, I don't know, it was weeks and weeks before I could actually just sit down and write it again. And but I did, you know, I just rewrote the whole thing in a matter of months. And in fact, that was the book that's now, it's been under option for some years, you know, it's bounced around between producers, but it's found a home. Which when I look it back, I think that's really bizarre. Like it started off apparently as something that should be sitting on the top of a pile of trash. And now, you know, so anyway, here we go.
wow.
I know.
Yeah, it's like you have to be willing to just sometimes throw something away and then
Yeah,
start over.
gotta
But
go.
like that first draft was just warming up, you know, kind of looking at it that way, right?
Okay, that's really beautiful to hear everybody's views. And I still remember, Sandhya, that the first time we ever met in the US in 1992 was at the Dada Vaswani Center in New Jersey. I don't know if you remember, but that was the very first time. So that's quite a coincidence. And I had just come to start my university in New York. So that was amazing. And you're one of the first friends I made. So thank you for that long-standing friendship. And actually, I wanted to shift gears and ask you, actually, Sandhya, what is the role of Literary Safari, the children's media studio that you founded, in the educational world? And how did that lead to creating your own podcast, the Story Seeds podcast?
So I started in journalism, but I'd always really been interested in education, and I just love children. But I knew I could never be a classroom teacher. That takes a whole other set of skills that I just don't possess, like patience and sort of being able to um, be what I mean. Teachers are heroes, right? So. But I always said, I want to figure out a career that allows me to write, to help children and sort of families, right? So I think that I was really fortunate enough to have a number of experiences and jobs that sort of immersed me in the world of learning what exists out there that does that. Like I didn't actually know educational publishing was a thing at all, that you can learn just to write specifically for children, for schools, for learn sort of what happens under the hood of education and learn how to design media that supports kids to be entertained but also educated. So I had a few different jobs, like one at a magazine for children, that was called Weekly Reader, and I worked on a number of their different publications, including I used to edit a magazine called Writing for teens, and then I worked at Scholastic, which was people think of as a trade books, but I actually worked. They have a whole education division, and so I worked on their textbooks, which were like kind of interesting textbooks that looked like magazines but were actually supposed to be textbooks. And I learned about standards and all these different things. And sort of when I was about to enter my venture into parenthood, I was like, oh, I think I want to be a mom now, and I think I want to freelance, and I want to be a writer. That's kind of what I decided, because I had this very romantic vision of myself just sitting and writing books, because I had written one, right? And so I went freelance and started Literary Safari. And it was just going to be like, it was my blog actually originally. I used to interview authors and all that. So that was the name I stuck with. And then I basically started a studio, and I just was writing a lot of, books for children for the school market.
Yeah.
And then I found that I was really not happy just writing because I felt very lonely, because I was a collaborator, I was a producer, editor, and I liked kind of doing things as collaboratively. So that's how I sort of pivoted what we do on a daily basis. And so right now, what my studio does is work with clients. So they'll come to us and say, we want to make a series of books for the school market that are by diverse authors, and we want kids to have stories that represent them. And can you help us find the authors? Or we're making a curriculum for preschool that's kind of more about social emotional learning. Can you help us design the curriculum? We're doing a video game. We need somebody to help us script. So kind of like all kinds of things, which I really like. I'm a Gemini, so I get happy when I can have variety. So it suits me really well. So I have kind of like the client side, and then I've worked with a lot of authors over the years, and that led me to creating my own podcast about a year and a half ago, because I was really intrigued by the author process and how writers, come up with an idea and really see it through. And I was also, I'm a mother. I have a 12-year-old daughter. And when she was young, she just blew me away with her imagination and kind of the things she would come up with. And as parents, we take them for granted until they get to a certain age. And then I realized, like, she started school and she got to third grade, and there wasn't space for that in her life anymore to just imagine and like grow things, right? So I started really thinking about that, and I said, you know what, I want to make a podcast that allows children's ideas to be matched with authors, where they can sit together and collaborate. Because I think it's really interesting, like what happens if an adult gives a child the same respect and they sit at the same table at the same level, what would happen? And that was the experiment with the podcast. And we created a whole series where these collaborations happened. And so like I would come to Sahara with my idea, and then we would record them sitting next to each other, and they would write a story on one episode, and the next episode another kid would be matched with, like, let's say Kavita, and they would sit together, brainstorm the idea, and then the author Kavita would go home and write like a 500-word story to get the kids started, and then we sort of have the episode around that. So again, like end of the day, I was trying to figure out how to pull all my different interests together, and the podcast was a really like natural next step to doing that.
That's amazing, because thank God you told me to listen to one of your podcasts, and I really, really enjoyed it. And now I really understand. I think, I don't know if all of you, viewers also feel like there's a block when it comes to thinking of podcasts, or if many of you listen to podcasts, but listening to yours was really nice. I heard one of them about the hungry mirror, was it?
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to see that the child just has to have the seed or the idea, and how the author helped the child and how that really worked. I totally understood it better after listening to your podcast. So thank you for that. It was beautiful.
And Sanam, I think in terms of what a podcast is, I think you wanted me to just sort of define it simply.
Yeah, maybe simply, yeah.
Yeah, very simply. It's just audiobook, but it exists in many platforms. So it's like a shorter audiobook. There are different, there's interviews, there's storytelling podcasts, there's news podcasts, and everyone has an app on their phone. You just open up the podcast app, and you can search for a topic that's interesting to you, like Bollywood or spirituality or meditation, and then you can subscribe to it and just listen at your ease on your phone itself. So it's a really great tool.
That's cool. And what about Kavita and Sahara? Any thoughts on podcasts, or not really in that space yet? No.
I have an iPhone 5, so I'm nowhere near. Yeah.
Okay.
Very low tech.
Actually, I really like the idea.
Yeah.
For kids and adults. I can't wait to listen to your podcast, by the way. I'm sorry I haven't done it so far, but I will.
Yeah,
Sure.
it'll be amazing if everybody, so we can
Yeah.
ask Sandhya to put that up on the chat later. And
Yeah, that would be amazing.
beautiful. Yeah. So now back to Kavita. As an Indian living abroad, many of us can also relate to the Indian society and traditions that are present. And I was wondering, especially while writing your first book for matrimonial purposes, what was the driving force behind it? And what was the response you received from this book?
Well, I think I just wanted to be able to share some stories about how the world of arranged marriage works, but set in a really modern context. Although, that book came out not quite 20 years ago, and it's changed even more since then, right? But back then, I kind of grounded in what a traditional way of finding a husband or wife, and updated it and tried to make it light and fun and engaging. And I was really shocked at how quickly it took off. So my agent, she sold it, I think, within 2 weeks. It went to auction in both the US and the UK. So I had 4 publishing houses in the UK and 6 in the US bidding. Of course, they've now all consolidated. There's like 1 publishing house left in the world. But anyway, and then suddenly she was selling all these foreign rights. So it got picked up in, Germany, Spain, France, et cetera, et cetera. So I was really a little stunned by that. I would imagine something like that would happen today. I just thought maybe 20 years ago. But anyway, it went to the Frankfurt Book Fair. It got picked up there. So I thought that was kind of great, and I went on a 12-city book tour as well, which also, that doesn't happen, that really barely happens anymore. And then that 1 book deal became a 3-book deal, and then it sort of went on from there. So yeah, it was a surprise, but
a good one.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah,
it was good. Yeah.
That's amazing, because I was there for one of your book readings in Hong Kong at the Foreign Correspondents Club, FCC. Yeah. And it just suddenly hit me that, I had gone, I don't know, it was around 2004 or something, sometime then. And I was actually very much in awe of you and your book. So thank you so much for creating an interest in reading for me, because I was not much of a reader back then. And still, I'm not like such an avid reader, but I've improved from then. But you really played a big role in that for me. So that was really amazing.
Great.
Well, so thank you. It's just so exciting. But and Sahara, now we'll go to you. As a relatively new author, I know you might have already answered some of these questions, but if you can share some more challenges or roadblocks you might have hit, and what kept you going, and the qualities that you feel you need to be an author. I know you kind of touched upon it, but if there is more you'd like to add, that would be amazing. And I'm sorry I didn't get to address the fact that when you first spoke about how you saw this person, not wanting to live his life, I think that really must have been a wake-up call for you, and just, like, quite.
I mean, we hear about it in newspapers every day, right? Because the suicide rate in like Hong Kong and a lot of places is pretty high. And even the way the world works, all of this it's like you will hear every few weeks. I mean, students, jumping off buildings, or people, because it's so, even the lifestyle is so economically high for them. Sometimes they can't cope. Like, it could be different factors, it's just another way to end the depression. But either way, I figure, if you got to come back and learn these same lessons again, maybe it's better we start now instead of,
as kids also to learn.
And I feel like definitely for kids, if they're already able to see life because if you go to see nowadays, the kids are pretty woke, they know what they like, they know what they don't like. They're pretty open to speaking to their parents very honestly, very truthfully, and saying, this works, this doesn't work. And we still try to bring these old age ideas into the world and, keep it very like 9 to 5 and this and that. And, it just sometimes doesn't. It quells your, creativity. It takes away the fun of living life. So I get these things happen. So that's why, I mean, just a book out there that even like it's a storybook even for adults. The picture part is for the kids, for the kids who can't read, because the pictures are very lively. And you asked for the book, actually I have it outside. The pictures are very lively, and they just pop. So even a tiny kid, I have a few of my nephews and nieces who are like babies, maybe like 6 months old, and they look at the book and they're pointing at it. And like, I have another one who's over a year old who's kissing, and saying, Mama, Gaia is so beautiful. And, like little things, like they vibe with that. And then it was written in such a way that, all of these things that we've learned in our lives, like, spiritual knowledge, or, like Dada Vaswani would say something, or Satguru says something, or Muji says something, and it's all written in story form, so that the adults can read more deeper than the kids, so it kind of ends up being like that. And so, the hurdles to getting there was, I wanted to give up. I gave up, then I got back on it. Again, I gave up, I got back on it. Like that's, I guess, the process for me, I didn't want to do it. I cried through the entire process. At some points, I literally got rejected by a bunch of publishers because something like this doesn't have a genre, You can't say it's a kid's book because it's not only a kid's book. There's no genre known as, a storybook for adults and kids. Like it just doesn't exist. So, just trying to even push it out there, and then thinking, okay, maybe self-publishing is the only way to go, which makes this easier. And then the marketing is a different thing, and it all looks very glamorous, and the idea of being an author is very glamorous, but the work behind is I'm not even there yet. Like I'm like still at the 20% mark. I still have like 80% to, basically go to yet. So it's like you kick and you scream, and then you gotta move 2 steps, come back 5 steps, move 3 steps, then come back 2 steps. It's like that. But it's interesting because this is my voice, and every time I have to keep facing parts of myself which I don't want to show to the world. And I have to keep telling myself that I'm safe to show that part to the world. And it's going to be okay. And I can allow myself to be vulnerable. And it has nothing to do with people's opinions of me. It's solely my opinion of myself. So it's a process, and it's a journey, and it's adventurous and fun and sucky and all of the above,
Well said, well said. I think you summarized everything. And I think that this is a common thread, the feeling of vulnerability, I guess, when you put yourself out there as an author. I'm sure even Kavita and Sandhya, like you have gone through that feeling. So, because I just resonate with the fact that I also get very excited. I write 1 chapter or 1 page of something, and then I just leave it. So I know exactly where that, so I'm like, no, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm not ready, but probably I have to deal with what you all said, my own roadblocks and my own journey to be ready to go, take that next step. So anyway, but if Kavita and Sandhya, you'd like to add anything, please let me know and see if you'd like anything.
Just, I mean, as you were saying, Sahara, just the whole marketing and promoting of, like who wants to do that? Nobody. It's awful. You just would rather have somebody else handle it. But even in mainstream publishing today, they just don't do it, and even back then when I was, writing, and I've had big publishers and big publishing houses, but one publicist would handle like 10 authors at a time. She's planning 8 book tours at a time. Like you really have to be so motivated. And today my understanding is that when a publisher is deciding, will we take this author on, they look at their social media, they look at how many followers, how engaged. I mean, that is the basis by which they choose who they bring in and who they don't. And if you don't want to play in that space, it is really challenging. So yeah, anyway, it's just the nature of
to you for like just saying, okay, I'm going to self-publish this, because I think we all have an audience, right? And so by allowing, like, the invention of self-publishing has just democratized writing in a way that it's not just, it's not that you have to be a celeb. I mean, there are all these awful celebrity picture books, right? I mean, you don't have to say, okay, that's the only path. And, there are different ways in which to go about creating one, sort of like building the muscle to do whatever it is that we have to do. It is, Ju, I think it is like a muscle. You just have to like slowly build it, and then you go through ups and downs, right? But I think we all have. But I think like just saying that there are all these tools out there to be able to create your own work and put it into the world, and then the marketing and the other pieces are exhausting. I agree. 100%. But then, it's like you just, if I may share a small anecdote, like I think one very interesting experience I've had was when we finished the podcast, we published an activity book. And so we had made all these little zines that went with the podcast. So when you listen to each episode, the kids can write their own stories, draw, do science activities. And during the pandemic, we were just putting them for free on our website so parents and teachers could download them. So we put them all into like a book, right? Like an activity book. I think I have it here. And self-published it, and you could order it on our website, or you could order it on Amazon. And the interesting thing was, like, it was just sort of doing its thing for a year. And I would just keep writing. Anytime I saw a reporter wrote about something related to podcasts or children's activity books, I would write them an email. I set up like a Google news alert. And then eventually, it took almost a year and a half. And one in Wirecutter, which is like a New York Times reviewer thing, somebody wrote about it as a gift, like a recommended gift for kids. But it took a year and a half of just saying, I'll just do this. A friend said to me, every day, just write like 2 emails to someone. Every day in the morning, just sit down and write 2 emails. And I sort of was like, that's probably some of the best advice I ever got. It wasn't like you have to do it all, just every day write 2 emails. And that, I think, was good advice for just how to, try to do a new craft maybe, or get yourself out there. So
being persistent and just being consistent.
Yeah, and not being attached to the outcome. Just like, I did the book, I got to just do this. This is just part of it. Yeah. I'm just doing it. I'm just putting it out there. I'm asking for myself, but I'm also asking because I know I've created something beautiful and the world should find it. So just put that energy out and let it go, Yeah.
So. Yeah, that sounds good. So Sandhya, I know you have made it your life's mission to use storytelling as a tool to help young people understand the world through your writings and podcasts. So could you share your personal story about what inspired you to do so?
I think I talked a little bit about that. But I would say I always loved to read and write. Like, if people ask me my hobbies, that's basically what they were when I was a child, right? Those were the 2 things that I loved. But I couldn't figure out what to do with that. That was like one thing, because I'm all over the place, as you can hear. So I think what I would just pray on, I would say, let me use my writing as a tool to serve. Like, and however that may be, that was like sort of my prayer as I was trying to figure out my life path. And then that, I think over the years, what I've learned is that like my writing can be a skill that I use to, help fundraise, or my writing can be a skill to, help tell a story. Because ultimately, I think any writing you do is about telling a story, and I think storytelling is the heart of like human life. It sounds very dramatic, but I think we're all here because we believe that in some way, that it's like we grew up with our grandmothers telling us stories, right? That's what they did. They told us stories and we listened, and that helped shape who we were. And we tell stories, and hunter gatherer, everybody, like throughout history we've told stories. And I think that for children to have the stories provided to them that represent their experience, but also open them up to new things, is what they need. In the work that I do, there's a metaphor that I really love. It's called window. There's a writer, she said, children need windows, doors, and mirrors. So they need windows through which they can see into other worlds, mirrors in which they can see themselves reflected, and doors, like stories can also be doors you can walk through, and when you're looking in a door, sometimes it's a mirror too, right? And I think that metaphor is kind of the heart of what I think kind of inspires me. How do you achieve that, right? Through storytelling.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well said, really. That's beautiful. Kavita, yeah, I know you spoke that that there were your books were published in 17 different languages, right? But I was just wondering if you could, explain the story behind how that came about. Like, how come it got picked up? Like, any idea of how that happened? Or
I think it's like everything else. When one publisher somewhere, has it, then everybody else, it just became a thing without anybody really trying very hard. But I'm just, kind of thinking back when I did that first one, because it was something I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And because I did so well, then my publisher, at the time was Penguin, said, oh, okay, write a second book. And I said, okay. So then I had to come up with that second book, and I did that. And then the third one, my agent actually rang me up and said, can you do something about a Muslim girl? And I said, why? And she says, because Muslims are hot right now. And I said, I don't know what that means, but okay. So I did that. And then the fourth one, I had a publisher, Little Brown, reach out, and she was actually Indian. And she says, have you ever considered doing young adult? I said, I have not. She says, do you want to? And I said, okay. So I did young adult. And then her boss, who then moved to HarperCollins, called and said, do another young adult. And I said, okay. So that was, book. And it sort of went from there. And I just feel like wherever there was a void, or somebody had an idea, I would just go with it. Yeah. And so I kept going. And then I started working on something about 3 years ago. I started, I said, what do I really want to write now without all of this other stuff? Yeah. My agent had passed away. I didn't have one anymore. And I said, what do I really want to do? And my husband he was so fantastically encouraging. And he would say to me, as Sahara, you had your friend say, what have you done today? That was my husband. He said, okay, what are you working on? And even though I was, working as a full-time journalist, we've homeschooled our children. So it's not like they went to school and I had time. We were the educators. Oh. And so there was that, so my life was very, very full. But I said, and very social, because of the nature of the things that I covered, beauty, fashion, wellness. I was out all the time. But I said, let me just write the book that I want to write. And I sat down and I, started doing that. I was making quite good progress. And then suddenly my husband passed away. So he's been gone not quite 2 years. So in the middle of me trying to do this, and then COVID happened, and then he had a heart attack and was, literally gone from one day to the next. So, having to navigate life as a sudden widow at 55 with 2 children. So obviously all of that had to get set aside. Like, everything I wanted to do I couldn't do anymore. I just had to rethink things. But so now, his second death anniversary is July 27th. And I thought something has to happen on the 20th. I don't know what it is yet, but whether I pick up that, do something else, I don't know. But in a way to honor him, I have to create something either on that day or by that day. So that's the game plan for the next, 8 weeks. So anyway, but I suppose you just have to go where life leads you, right? You can't plan or predict, as we know. And you just almost have to release expectations and say there's a plan. I don't know what it is, but let's just figure it out as we move through life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. I really hope you come up with an amazing project to dedicate it to your husband. That would be really amazing.
Well,
So good luck with that. Yeah, that'd be really something. And Sahara, I really like the part in the book where you say that whenever you look around, you will see hidden signs in all my creation, reminding all of you who you truly are. Could you elaborate on this? It would be lovely to hear your perspective on the statement.
So for me, it's Mama Gaia is a conversation with the universe. It's with the power within us, the power that life is, nature is. Nature is the only thing that operates how it does without a boss actually overseeing. Everything has its own time and cycle and all of that, right? So if you go to see, we're pretty close to that because our natural cycle also kind of changes according to how nature changes. So whenever I'm stressed, I literally just have to go to the beach, or that's the only thing that'll calm me, or nature will calm me, or sitting in a four-walled room doesn't do it for me. That's not calming exactly. It's breathing the fresh air. It's just feeling one with nature. And so whenever you look outside, you can look at the sky and suddenly it'll come to peace. Something within you will be peaceful. You'll be out near the ocean and something within you will become peaceful. You'll be in a mountainous area with forests and trees and stuff, and then something within you will settle. So for me, I feel like the hard stuff is just us doing it to ourselves. It's just a way more into suffering. But the lightness of life is exactly where we're supposed to be. It's like that's the right path to follow, So, when you look outside, you feel lighter, and that's the path. That means there's something way bigger outside that's talking to us, So for me, that was it. If people just start, sitting there, or kids understand that, it's not the video games that make them feel good, because they'll just get more aggressive and more irritated, and the depression will happen anyway, and the anger will happen anyway, and the teenage frustrations will happen anyway. It's you take a teenager out to hike or something, and before you know it, they're calm. So that's exactly what I meant. So the signs are all around us. It's just it's us who choose the hard or the easy. That's it. And just in case you wanted to see it, this is Mama Gaia, and these are the illustrations, and it's pretty illustrated.
Because I really feel that really adults and children both can really learn so much from it. It's amazing. At all different ages of the child can pick up something which maybe they'll have to reread it at another age and pick up something more. That's
it helped me. I could be sitting there and I'd be like, but when I read it, sometimes I don't even think I've written it. I literally feel like I was an empty bone and it came through, and I just literally wrote the words. When you read back some of your writing, if it's inspired or something, you won't even feel it's you anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm sure these two would agree for sure.
Yeah. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
100%.
yeah. So I just have one more question for Sandhya, and then I thought if any of the viewers have any questions, we can um, open the floor, and if you can put it on the chat box if there's any other question you want to ask these three beautiful women. Um, I'll just ask Sandhya my last question, and then we can continue from there with any other questions from the audience. Um, what are some of the things that you have implemented in your work in children's media, including books and podcasts, that have made an impact on families and young people?
It's a great question that I think about a lot. Like, what do families and children need nowadays that they didn't need before? I think our world has changed dramatically, as we've seen even in the last 2 years, but over the last decade. And I love what you said, Sahara, about, take a teenager out into the woods or on a hike and they totally calm down. Um, and I think that what what research has shown, what learning science has shown, is that joint engagement is the word they call it, but basically playing together, reading together, consuming media together, ha- um, sort of diffuses the negative effects of screen time. So, we have a lot of conversations about, oh, these kids, they're always on their phones, they're always on their, devices, they're always playing video games. So I think one of the things is at a young age, it's how do you design apps, or how do you design any media, books even, that allow opportunity for adults and children to come together, and whether that's a caregiver, a parent, a grandparent. Is there a way in which you can sort of create space basically in your day to do those things together? Because I think what kids want most of all is not to necessarily tell you about what they're reading or tell you about what they're playing, but experience it with you. And I think that by creating that space for that, it helps them sort of on a social emotional level, but also helps them become strong. Like they say, read aloud to your kids, right? Reading aloud book, it's not like, here kid, I brought you books, go read them. Really, as parents and as grandparents, sitting with them and actually reading the books together. And they're never too old. I have a friend who, her son's in high school, she still reads to him every night before he
Wow.
goes to bed. Like they're reading Lord of the Flies, like more mature,
Book.
classic literature. They read together, and I think that can be a habit that, or as a family, like pick a book and just kind of talk about a paragraph of it or whatever. So I guess in the work that I do, I try to kind of create opportunities for that. Like in the podcast, it is sort of a young person and an old person. So if you listen together, you can kind of both enjoy it, right? It's not just for kids, it's not just for grown-ups. And Sahara, I still read picture books. Like I have 3 to 4 shelves full of picture books. That's the genre that I think you're never too old for. So as a parent, like this is, I'll sound evangelical about it, but never say to your child, you're too old for a picture book. Like you're never too old for a picture book. I bring home stacks of them and I read them, and Amrita's like, oh, you're still reading that? Yeah. And so like this last summer we started, reading picture books again together. So again, just, kind of do it together, and then you'll understand them, but they'll also understand you. So how do you, like, that's my daily challenge, really.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. I don't see any questions. So if anyone does not have any questions, do any of you have any final advice you can give to someone who wants to become an author, or if there are any tools or practices or any lasting words that you'd like to say? I'll leave the floor open to 3 of you.
You can go first, Kavita.
Well, I was just thinking, obviously, because it seems so overwhelming when you have an idea for anything, whether it's a novel or a nonfiction book, or, an essay, whatever it is. And I always think in terms of 1,000 words, 1,000 words, 1,000 words, you know, and I think just even as a journalist, right, an editor would say, give me 800 words on this by this day. So the way that I got anything done ever was I would say I would do 1,000 words or an hour, whatever comes first. And so sometimes at the end of the hour, I've only done 400 words, but you know, it doesn't matter. But if I get to the 1,000, and then even if they're not great, and it doesn't have to be a perfect 1,000, I found that is the one thing that has gotten me anywhere, you know, just to kind of stick to that. Number one. And I think, and secondly, just not to be afraid of the idea of just reinventing yourself as you go along, right? So I've been a journalist for 40 years, and most of my work in the past few years was with the LA Times. I was, you know, I wasn't ever a staff member, but I wrote for them constantly. And then when COVID happened, that all fell apart. So that ended. And then my husband passed a couple of months after. And then when you don't have your work as an identity, when you don't have being a married woman as an identity, then you think, okay, who am I now, right? What do I do next? And so just starting to think about reinventing. And so I've spent the last 22 months basically doing that and not being afraid of it. So all the things I thought I might have wanted to do before, but I could never do, I thought, you know what? I want to be a landlady. I want to invest in a small property somewhere and do that. So I did that. Then I wanted to invest in a little beauty business, and I will do that. And then maybe I will ghostwrite a book for somebody. So I've done 2 of those. And then I can do branded content. I can do all the things I never could have done because now I was free in many ways. So yeah, that was my thing, just to not be afraid to embrace change, even when it's hard, even when it stems from tragedy and loss. Just step forth and just do it anyway, because you don't know what happens tomorrow.
That's bloody inspirational, man.
Yeah.
Like so
But really, you know, so anyway.
So before we continue, sorry, there is a question from Komal. How can we connect to the podcast?
So it's you can go to the website. I'll put in the chat too. It's Story Seeds, plural seeds, podcast.com. And then I'll also actually what I'll put in the link is we have a page on the website that sort of explains, if you're new to podcasts, how you can listen. And you know, sort of, so I think that might be helpful if people are new generally to podcasts. That might be informational, and then it'll have little links to apps you can use to listen to podcasts. So and then you can subscribe, or you can open your podcast player that you use, if it's Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, and subscribe to Story Seeds podcast.
Okay, and you can use Spotify also, right?
Oh yeah, yes, Spotify. Yeah, so for those who use Spotify, in fact, I listen to a lot of podcasts on Spotify. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
So we'll have Sahara, her lasting words, and if there's anything that you have next in your mind, what you want to do next or anything.
I don't know. I wanted to write another book. Again, the idea is floating and it's still right there. It hasn't moved from there. So I'll probably need someone to like hold me accountable very soon. But other than that, I don't know. I'm literally open to it, you know. I loved what Sandhya was saying about designing curriculums, because, you know, for me, energy is a very big thing. And so I've always, you know, played with the idea of, you know, designing a curriculum for kids where from a very young age they start, you know, understanding energy, understanding the words that they use, understanding how much power that holds, and doing little experiments, you know, alongside with that. And you know, just discovering this whole potential so that they don't use the words in their head to speak against themselves and their life, you know, because it's like Kavita was saying, right? Everything's a story. or Sandhya was saying, I'm not sure who said that right now, but our entire life is a story of what we've literally told ourselves, from when we could think in words or talk in words. And if someone said we were bad and we believed we were bad, that was part of a story, that was literally a chapter in our life. So I would really, really like to delve into that. So I'm thinking, I have no idea where I'm going, but I will get somewhere.
Somewhere. That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. It'll be
So
exciting.
good luck. Good luck. Yeah. And Sandhya, is there anything else you'd like to add? Last piece of advice?
I think your question was what tools or if someone wanted to
Yeah.
write.
Yeah.
So, what helped me kind of get, and I don't do it religiously anymore, but I have like over 100 notebooks. So I used a book called The Artist's Way, which if anyone is thinking, I want to get reconnected to my creative self, I think it's an incredible tool. I don't know, Kavita or Sahara, if you, yeah.
I have it, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, basically she was actually the author, Julia Cameron, she was an alcoholic, and she found the whole sort of like, how many ever steps kind of model. She took that model and she applied it to creativity and created this whole like program basically for people. So you kind of like go through all your stories of your life to kind of exercise them from your mind. Like, what is stopping you from, your inner critic? It has your, like, how do you kind of like get back to finding your creative self? And then one of the prescriptions or commitments of doing it, it's a book and you kind of work through all the chapters, is every morning when you get up, you write what she calls morning pages. And you just write 3 pages, like longhand is her thing, because when you write by hand, you're really connecting to your brain and your energy. And you write 3 pages nonstop. You're not like editing yourself. You're just free writing. And I think if anyone is thinking about, wanting to write, even that's just a great way to do it. And then, just find or give yourself like the freedom to not edit yourself. Like, don't write a word and be like, oh, that's not good, I'm gonna cross it out. Just go, you know what I mean? And then go back over it like after a month and say, oh, this was interesting, that was interesting. That might be, I know for me, when I was trying to embrace that side of myself, that was the most powerful tool that helped me. So
I always go back to that, by the way. Every time I fall off and I'm like not understanding where I'm going next, that's what I do. I always have like notebooks on notebooks on notebooks, morning pages.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Great.
Couldn't we listen to all of you 3 all night long? There's so much to learn from all of you. So I just know that I feel more joyful after the session. So thank you to our 3 panelists for making us feel more inspired to find the love of reading again. And hopefully some of you in the audience will aspire to write a book of your own too one day, as we all have something that we can contribute to this beautiful world. Even just one person can have a huge impact in our lives. And thank you to all our viewers who made it today to listen and to learn from Kavita, Sahara, and Sandhya. When I first thought I wanted to do a panel discussion interviewing the 3 of you, I just thought that the common thread was that you all are authors. However, the more I delved deeper, I realized that all of you have another very important quality in common. And that is, as women, you stood up to what you believed in and did not just follow the norms of society. And that is what makes you unique. In my talks, I say how I like to find unity in diversity. And finally, through this experience, I was able to find it So thank you so much, Kavita, Sahara, and Sandhya, for enabling me to do that, and for giving us great hope to build a better and brighter future for our next generation around the world. Baba says, religions are many, but goal is one. Flowers are many, but worship is one. Jewels are many, but gold is one. Clothes are many, but yarn is one. Cows are many, but milk is one. Beings are many, but the indweller is one. Baba. So it's just beautiful that all of you have so many different things that you could bring to today's panel discussion. A lot of different things and yet so much of similarity. So I'm really happy with this unity and diversity that I found from the three of you. And I just wanted to thank you again. And I do invite you to put your contact information on, or your social media information. So maybe we can follow you. If you'd like to put it on the chat, we can have that. Otherwise, after we finish with our discussion today, I can WhatsApp it to my group of lovely audience and viewers. So, really, thank you so much.
Thank you. You women are amazing. It was amazing, sharing this panel with you. All of you.
This is such a nice hour. Thank you. I
Thank
learned
you.
so much. And I love what you said, Sanam, because we have such different experiences, but there were so many sort of common points, and at the same time, things to take away to apply to what we do every day. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're lovely being with you all and spending this time with you all. So I'll say bye now. And thank you to all the viewers for all your time and patience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.